Good morning, afternoon, and welcome to our monthly webinar series. We hope that everyone is staying safe out there wherever you may be right now. With everything going on, we just wanted to share a little bit of our knowledge with you. So today we'll be discussing how to ramp up work capabilities in order to safeguard your business. So Adil, should we get going?
Thank you, Emma. We'll jump right in and echo Emma's sentiments. We want to make sure that all our clients and partners are taking all the precautions and are safe, and hope for this pandemic to end soon, hopefully. So yeah, today's topic, I put together a quick introduction, as always, for those of you that are new to SafePass. We're going to talk a little bit about what's been occurring in the last few weeks and months. And we won't dwell on that too much, but just more from a risk and response perspective. Our domain expertise is around risk management, so we'll take that perspective. One of the areas the response has been executed is through business continuity and planning. So we'll discuss some best practices around that, maybe a few checklist of areas that you can, now that we're thinking about more about continuity and recovery, what can we do, and then share some ideas around remote work, which is a big part of the business continuity and recovery plan for our customers and partners as well. Just by the way, we have at SafePass had built quite a bit of experience since the beginning of the company. When it was founded, we have encouraged remote work and work from anywhere kind of a policy. So we're fortunate to have a good infrastructure place. But our thoughts do go out to people that cannot do remote work, those healthcare heroes, as they're becoming to be known as, that are in the front lines in this pandemic. So those doctors, nurses, and healthcare workers that are really protecting us in these tough times, our hearts and prayers go to them. So we'll talk about how fortunate we are to be able to do most of our work remotely, but also at the same time, do what we can to help those that are in need right now. Visibility into data and chaos. So again, a lot of our risk management eventually boils down to understanding undiscovered, hidden risk, if you will. That's sort of built into our mission. And so we'll talk about how you can use data analytics. We'll talk about a customer case study, and I was kind of thinking back to 2008. Went through that crisis, part of our team, and some of the customers' steps they took during the recovery and resilience phase of that crisis, which was obviously very different. But some of the data and analytics capabilities we have developed since 2008 might come in handy to folks that are maybe needing that kind of help, and we're here to help. So we're offering, as you'll see at the end of the presentation, if you stay along, we're offering some new capabilities at no cost to our partners and customers to help with the recovery and resilience of businesses, which is where we can help the most based on our domain expertise. So just a very brief on who we are, how we got here. So we've been doing this for, I looked at my LinkedIn profile, someone asked me about a question, and I couldn't remember how long it's been. So it's more than 16 years we've been doing this. Back in 2012, we published a book called Governance, Risk, and Compliance Handbook for Oracle Applications. We've been recognized by Gartner, worked closely with them, and also through various user groups. Those of you that could not make the events this year, Emma and I are working with the various user groups and organizations like ISACA, where we were planning to present this year. As you can see, Collaborate was in April, and ISACA, they're obviously canceled. So we are looking for alternatives that these organizations are offering, because we had a number of presentations and participation, sponsorships, etc. So we will continue to reach out to you and offer, whatever we have learned in the past crisis, as well as how our customers are handling the current situation, trends and tools we are doing for the market. We'll be glad to share that through our presentations that are coming up. Again, our knowledge is really comes from our customers, right? So having worked with these companies in the trenches over 16 plus years now, with 200 plus customers. So we owe our knowledge and our best practices to these great organizations that have given us the opportunity to come into their organization, help them improve risk management, information risk management, all the way from the crisis around SOX and Sarbanes-Oxley back in 2001 to the banking crisis in 2008, and now the current war. So we are fortunate to have learned through those steps, and as our customers have shared their pain points, we've addressed those. So that's our credentials essentially. So let's jump into the current topic. So let's talk about the pandemic, and I always like to start with some numbers to give a kind of thing in a more objective perspective, because people are, for rightful reasons, really concerned about what's happening, where we're going. There's very lot of lack of visibility, as we call it, right? So what's the real impact on numbers in the economy? So 24% drop expected in Q2 in the U.S. economy in terms of GDP. That's reported in a Goldman Sachs study that just came out about a week ago. Market, I'm glad to say that it's doing a little bit better in the last couple of days here in the U.S. and worldwide. But when a couple of days ago when I looked, it was 23 trillion down from the middle of February time. So within a month or so, we had seen a 23 trillion drop. I'm hoping that will change with the $2 trillion package that was passed this morning by the U.S. Congress and should be turned into a law in the next couple of days. So we're looking forward to helping companies benefit from that. I live in Dallas, and my local airlines, American Airlines and Southwest Airlines, are significantly impacted. They essentially come to a complete shutdown. So we're eager to help businesses locally as well as around the world with this challenge. Also, I wanted to, today's topic is remote work, so I wanted to kind of recognize that Gartner says that 88% of the organizations have encouraged or required their employees to work from home due to the virus, and that's a survey they just did again a week ago. Gartner's been really forward thinking on this. They had published some interesting research on business continuity planning, and I'll cover a little bit of that that I've been briefed on. And then 37 million, that's the unfortunate fact that that's the amount of layoffs just in U.S. In the private sector that's expected to happen over the coming weeks and months in Q2 of calendar year. And that's really unfortunate because obviously the world economies were all doing well. U.S. was nearly at zero unemployment. So we're going to unfortunately see that. And just looking around in my neighborhood in Dallas, the companies like restaurants and bars and people are really impacted with that, and those temporary workers are unfortunately the first ones to go. So again, anything we can do to help find them new opportunities through customers that are doing well, like Amazon and retailers like Walmart, they are moving that. So hopefully this won't be as bad a number, but that's what the number is projected according to MarketWatch. Okay, so those are some of the signs that we're responding to this pandemic. And then what is pandemic risk? Let's get down to our little world of operational risk management. So when we think about operational risk management, you've got the credit risk, you've got the market risk. The operational risks are listed on the left here. Again, pandemics are part of that operational risk, and we're obviously living through that right now. I just wanted to bring some context to how this fits into what we do in the risk management world. So you'll see things like separation of duties, business process risk, third-party risks on the right side, cybersecurity risk, which we've been talking about quite a bit in recent months around our access governance type solutions. But pandemic has always been on the radar. It's just that forefront, needless to say. And so we need to deal with it from a risk management practice, and that's what we're going to cover in this brief session. So the first question is this really a pandemic, right? I mean, it seems obvious, but there are certain signs, checklist, if you will, of a pandemic. So a pandemic is a worldwide in scope, which it clearly is. It is a moving target, right? So as we said in the abstract of this presentation, that nobody really knows all the what's going to happen exactly, right? We can all play with probability and stats, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So expectations and preparation as things change, right? Quarantines are in place. So unfortunately, New York has been declared as one of the epicenters here in the U.S. Certainly, we're seeing what's happening in Italy, and really wish them a speedy um, recovery from this problem. But you can see that quarantines and restricted travel. I just talked about the airlines. There's restrictions in intercontinental travel between Europe and U.S. and even within U.S. and Canada now. And so we're really locked down. Um, I was reading in the Times this morning that the most popular flight American Airlines had was from New York City to LA, which was one of their most profitable flights. And this week, that flight only had 7 passengers on it. So it is impacting economic conditions and really distorting how we measure and how we manage our business. And that is at the central theme of our presentation today: is how can we get better visibility. Um, Unfortunately, 422,629 cases. I checked on this International Society of Infectious Diseases website. It's a good site. It's a free site. It has drill down capabilities. So if you want to look at your own region and see how that's impacting you, take a look at this site. It's run by ProMed, and it also reported 18,895 deaths as of last night. So again, these are all signs of a pandemic, and I won't dwell too much on this. I'm sure getting your feed from the news outlets that you watch and keep up with. So it's just to get us on the level playing field by definition from a risk management perspective. Okay, so what should be our response at the highest level, right? So these are some thoughts that we have included in our abstract for this webinar. First thing is you got to secure your team, right? You got to minimize the impact on your folks that work for your organization and your customers and your support and so forth. So that's the number one priority of many organizations and executives, to make sure that your staff is safe and healthy and safeguarded, essentially, so they can perform the best they can in this environment. That's a challenge, right? Because I'll talk a little bit about remote work and what the challenge is, and I'll just kind of share my own story, I guess, just to see what I'm dealing with. But minimize the impact on organization supply chain. Next thing is, because the supply chain is global for most of our customer base, it is difficult, to say the least. Initially, it's, of course, we all know it started with China, spread across other regions. So if your supply chain is global, like Boeing, which is impacted significantly with this crisis and other crises, even internal to them. So, supply chain is an example. Now we're seeing the same thing spread into auto industry and certainly retail. We've all been to stores, not able to find toilet papers to just bring it home to many of us that have been just trying to get through our days. So yeah, supply chain impact is visible; it's everywhere. So how do we minimize that? If you're a Boeing, you're a GM, or if you're if you're a financial institution for that matter, minimize the impact upon service delivery, right? So service is what keeps our customers at the end of the day with us, whether you're a product company or a service company, processing their orders from your warehouse to them. That's really important. When you click that buy button on Amazon, you expect it to show up the next day. And our UPS workers, our delivery trucks, and all that, those people are taking chances and continuing to maintain that service for us. Same thing with car service or whatever you're using. So delivery is a key part of whether you're a product company or service company. You have to take care of your customers, and visibility around that is also a challenge. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Your IT infrastructure is impacting. That's another obvious sign. A lot of our clients have been talking to this last couple of weeks is just asking how they're doing. last month or so now. And I think not everybody's set up for VPN, right? We all assume that VPN is just automatically available to everybody, but companies have licensing issues and they have to increase their licenses because they didn't plan for all employees to be remote or 80-90% of them to be remote. So they're having to provision access, or people don't, simple things like don't remember their passwords because they never use the VPN. So there's that wave, but I think that's coming to an end. It was kind of the first response, if you will, for moving employees home. So, but it's putting a different kind of stress on your IT systems, right? Because you have fewer people manning the service desk, or you may have fewer people that can maintain infrastructure, right? Because they can't get to the location where they need to go under the quarantine process, or shelter at home, as we call it here in US. So those are some of the areas where IT infrastructure can get impacted because you're relying on that infrastructure to get through this remote work. So minimizing the impact on that is really important. Reducing financial impact, of course, all of this leads to financial impact, and we talked a bit about the airlines. So being able to understand what's happening and then being able to protect that the best you can. And ultimately, if you do all those other things, what should happen is your corporate reputation is intact. So doing the right thing and protecting your brand and what you stand for, your mission, that's really important to getting through this time. The decisions we make will reflect on our brand for many years to come. And ultimately, I think the silver lining is we will return to normality, right? We will get there, hopefully sooner rather than later, but we don't know for sure. So we got to start thinking about that. Is where is the resilience, and when does it come back to the organization, and what are the steps to get there? So enabling the organization to think and prepare for that normality when we're back to normal. Okay, so now that we've talked a bit about the pandemic and response, and maybe how to start thinking about the response, let's take a look at the actual recovery and of the recovery process from that risk response. So I borrowed this from Gartner. They put together a webinar on business continuity management relevant to the COVID crisis, and I see a lot of the good companies, thought leaders, putting information out there. This kind of sums it up for me, and hopefully you'll be able to leverage this presentation. As you know, we always make available to attendees through our website, so we will be putting this online. Governance and program management typically includes, if you look at the left side of this, and you can see the graphic, it's pretty easy to do, that there's crisis management program that organizations have in place. So, typically what our customers have asked us to do and what we have observed is that, automation of that crisis management program, right? So being able to send workflows or alerts to all your employees, notifying them of a change in business conditions that is outside of your normal business. So in this case, obviously any kind of health impact that the company is facing with a portion of their employees, being able to report that, any down services that are impacting customers or supply chain, etc. So those are the emergency services that customers need a way to quickly communicate. Luckily, many companies have something in place. If you don't, we have some offerings that we'll talk about at the end, some capabilities that you can leverage our platform to get there very quickly. And kind of has passed, unfortunately. That phase sort of started a couple of months ago. Business continuity programs. These are the programs of how we're gonna basically continue operating our business in a degraded environment. Let's just call it that. IT disaster recovery. So I mentioned, people may not be able to get to all the infrastructure. Their data may be in locations where they may face some downtime. So being able to switch over to a new data center, recovering lost data, those types of obvious things. But also just, if there's a lack of workers in a smaller location, and you need to move things around. So that's the data and disaster recovery piece. And third-party risk management. We all today are so integrated. We rely on third parties, whether it's just contractor you use to get through the day, consultants that are critical to your mission, or just equipment and parts that you need to run your oil field services, or a gas station, right? So being able to do that, third party risk management is critical to be able to rely on your suppliers and others that are impacted as well. So without which you cannot get your products out. And so that's part of the, if you look at that wheel on the right side, that is part of the BCM program that many companies have in place. And the reason I wanted to just touch on that is because we'll talk a little bit about maintaining visibilities and what I call key risk indicators in SafePass that'll help you maintain and get through this time, with the best visibility you have. So whether it's monitoring the supplier activities and the impact they're having, other third parties, etc., your customers, your information systems, your workforce, all of those areas I thought were very relevant, because what we need to do now that we have executed on this business continuity program is to monitor it, right? You manage what you monitor, as we all say. So now it's time to monitor these key elements of your business continuity management plan, and that's ultimately how you get the remote work done and build these capabilities out. So we have put together a list of items, a checklist, if you will, that'll help you think about the recovery and resilience program. So first thing is just keep understanding the impact. It's changing every day. You got to keep an eye on it. And I think all well-run companies are doing that. So no earth-shattering advice there, just to kind of continue to watch it. Identify, investigate, the risk events that are impacting you, and how do you minimize their impact in terms of risk, likelihood, and impact analysis. Enable measurement process. How are your employees doing? How's your business doing? So more measurement and more process management that now you have to do probably more remotely as well. So being able to manage that. I recall a visit with a head of healthcare minister in New Zealand, and I remember that we were discussing risk management, and one of the things he said to me was that my biggest risk is reputational risk, because if I run out of supplies, people die. And just thinking that comment is echoing in my head as I think about New York, and we're running out of masks and PPEs and all that. So supply chain is really important to the process, and process measurement is really important. So anywhere we can help, we're here to step up. Focus on current organizational data in conjunction with third-party resources. Again, it rings really true in the current environment where you're relying on, for example, manufacturing organizations to send out those protective equipment. 3M, for example, making the masks for our frontline healthcare workers. So that's a more obvious example of what healthcare industry is facing. Integrate external data sources. So this is an opportunity to maybe streamline through location and other news sources, independent news sources like WHO, World Health Organization, part of UN, and CDC here in the US or in your country, and manage and use the visual data to tell that story on how you're doing, how your employees are doing, customers and partners. So this is a few ideas that might be able to fit into your checklist of recovery and resilience. A few more to wrap up this topic. Generating recovery scenario, right? This is a good time to start thinking about how we're going to get past, once this all is behind us, how we're going to get back on our feet again, and start running like before this impact. So how will the operations come back online? Products and services, supply and demand. Impact on supply and demand could be different than what it is now. Hopefully your demand is going to come back to normal. If you're an American airline, you have more people to go. But in the meantime, you got to keep those planes safe. So they operate. So what that means for American airline is they have to take the plane out every day and run it around the runway just to make sure the tires stay on correctly and the gauges are working, right? So that's the type of recovery scenario that American Airline has to deal with, or any airline has to deal with. Discover business risks and sharing vital information. So these risks that are specific to your business, I call them KRIs, which we'll talk about today. That's the capability now that's going to be more needed than ever before, right? Because you have less visibility, there's more chaos. So how do you share that information? It's not just limited to your internal staff, it's also your third parties that you rely on, whether they provide a key component into your chemical recipe to ship your sanitizers out the door. You need to buy alcohol, right? So you'll need to be able to really understand these risks that are vital to your organization's recovery and resilience. Spot alternative methods and workflows. So workflows may be changed now and may be changed for some time to come. Unfortunately, even with the pandemic over, we will have time. We will need time to heal and get back to our normalcy as it can be. And so that's going to impact your goods, your people, your service, and maybe it's the time to look at those workflows and how those workflows will occur. Maybe you need more self-service to get through this remote work period, right? So identifying points of self-service and remote work automation, because this pandemic can continue for some weeks and months beyond just the immediate quarantine period of 2 or 3 weeks. You may have to work on site. Because one of our customers I was talking to in the Middle East, they're working in shifts now, so to keep that social distancing. They do need people to come in, but they've gone to a model where some come in each day or each week and the others work from home. So maybe that's a staggered approach to getting back online. So how are you going to manage that self-service? You may need some new workflows, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And after that, developing key risk indicators and KPIs. So being able to, developing those monitoring capabilities that you may not have in the past. It was people were able to walk next door and ask those questions. Now they're maybe in a different state or they can't travel. So being able to make that as part of your resilience program, which could also be now as well as longer term, right? It's not just about getting through today, but also, building this as part of your feedback loop in spirit of continuous improvement for longer term, to be able to use those KPIs, KRIs, any future uncertainties as well. So that's kind of thinking a little bit forward around resilience beyond recovery, and giving some ideas for you to consider as part of your move forward. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about remote work. I wanted to, as we think about the current state, remote work is, as I said, 88% of companies surveyed by Gartner are encouraging employees to work from home or demanding that. So what does remote work look like for people that don't do it every day? So I wanted to just kind of highlight a few of the challenges that I hear about from our customers, but also about our own employees and teams that are spread across, Europe, India, here in US, different states, of course, and Latin America. So we have a pretty diverse group of people, and these are some lessons that I've learned just helping our teams cooperate and collaborate over the last many years. We've been doing this. So one thing is that when people are new to remote work, and these are high-performing employees, their performance typically declines because they're used to engaging, folks in the office, and when that sort of connection disappears, you need some training. You need to prepare for that. It's not natural for people that are in the office to not have that social interaction, and there are some inherent challenges in remote work. Managers and that supervise the work may be sitting next door to you. Now you're afraid to call them because you don't know what they're dealing with. I've had people, in our own organization where someone's child is sick just on a normal week, and they have to take care of them, and so there's no one available right now with with the services the way they are. We're locked down, so there's you have to take care of your family, and I have two boys in their home, and they think dad's very approachable because we're all home, but I have work to do, presentations to give, and customers to take care of. So how do you deal with that lack of face-to-face, a lack of access to information too, right? Because you could walk up to a printer and get the information you need, and you just didn't think about having a report that you can download on a daily basis. That's very important to you to measure your customer service, or a dashboard that you now need to see how people are doing in terms of health and safety, working from home. Social isolation, the way I look at that is, we want that interaction. With social distancing, we're all isolated. So being able to offer people an outlet to be able to communicate, not just about work, but take some time in your work to really talk about that. Water cooler chat type moments where people just want to share how their day is, right? That's important to people. As humans, we need that social interaction. Another distraction, I mentioned the family itself, which is a blessing in a way because this is your opportunity to bond, but also, it can take time away from critical tasks, and so setting up those rules and boundaries. So I put together a few list of items that we implement here at SafePass to make effective remote work, possible, and that's our primary method of operating the business. So it's sort of battle tested, if you will. So what we do is do a structured check-in process. So we have a call every day where our remote teams get together on that call around key topics, which for us are customer service, products, and clients in general, pre-sales, customers that are needing help. So our teams from across the globe get on all of those regions that I mentioned, get on that call, and they basically check in. It's a check-in call. It takes about an hour because there's quite a few people on the call, and not everybody gets an opportunity to talk. But the state of the company is shared. So after that, we also encourage rather one-on-one calls. So for example, if we're talking about this webinar, we're not going to talk on the call, but Emma is based in Spain, and I'm here in Texas. So we'll have that one-on-one calls to check in. Okay, what are we doing? What's the outline? Who's presenting what? And so that's really important to build that one-on-one relationship, and then from there, come up with the deliverables or action items that are well documented and understood, so you can track your progress without having to be able to walk into the next door, to the next door's office, your colleague, and do that in person. So pretty standard stuff. Just wanted to share some ideas with you on how to make remote work more collaborative, and what we do and what we've learned. Other things that are important to us is the technology that you use for direct communication, right? So we have learned that not one tool is enough. Certainly, email is not enough, right? So you've got to use the video conferencing. There's a lot of uptake on things like Zoom and so forth. Video conferencing tools are cheap and they're easy to get, and so I think everybody's gone through that checklist already, and they've gotten that face-to-face part of it down. So we, for example, have today we will have a video Wednesday. So Wednesdays, everybody is asked to turn on their cameras and be able to see each other's faces and body language, which is so important to us because it gives us the visual cues that we need, right? And so people are resistant to it. They're like, I'm working in my jammies, I've got my house, I don't want to everybody see what I'm doing. But I think as humans, we need that interaction, and so we don't require that on every call, but on video Wednesdays, we do that face-to-face, and so we'll be doing that here in the next 20 minutes after this webinar. And one other rule I wanted to just mention briefly is the rules of engagement. So now that you have good communication, everybody's connected, we need to set up some rules, because not just the technology can be really painful sometimes. Someone's internet is not working, or the bandwidth is not there, and today everybody's using these tools, so sometimes they're slower. But to make really get value out of this whole remote work process, that what you need to do is establish, how frequently you're going to meet, what you're going to talk about, the agenda, the communication with other teams. That's really important. And so, for example, we use video conferencing for this daily check-in that I talked about. We use IM for urgent things. We use WhatsApp. So there are many different ways that you need to encourage and set those as guidelines, right? Because people don't feel comfortable just WhatsApping their manager sometimes if that's not a accepted behavior in our office, right? People maybe are used to just doing a very formal email. So this is the time where we need to open up those additional channels and establish those rules of engagement up front. A massive communication back and forth is required to make remote work effective, right? And so those are some of the stories that I wanted to share with our folks here, what's working for us. So now that we have covered sort of our top down, what are the risks and how do we work in this remote world? Let's talk about, now that you've got all these things in place, you've gone through your business continuity plan, how do you now sustain this and make it resilient? And that's the key of our today's session. SafePath has, the top you'll see Safe Insight, and that has the ability to provide you those key risk indicators and analytics that you need very quickly. Within days, you can leverage your data sources and build out dashboards against data sources that are going to give you that visibility, whether it's that CDC data, WHO data, or your own internal systems around customer service, supply chain, where you're not getting the visibility in a remote world. We can offer that through our cloud tools very quickly. So I'll talk a little bit about how that all works to be able to run analytics and data to get that. So this is some examples I just pulled out from our data sheets and our some previous case studies we've done. And I'll talk a little bit about our case study today from a customer that went through this crisis, in the last crisis, and what they did to recover from it. So supply chain risk management, just right now the issue is if you have a global supply chain, let's say you're a retailer of footwear, right? And so your pricing is impacted, your merchandise is not, you don't know where it's shipped from, there's pricing errors, there are claims that you have against your suppliers, possibly they billed you but not shipped the product. There's a little bit of a chaotic time. So you need some dashboards to control your supply chain risks. And this is just some examples around those key metric that you may have in place in that area. Your customer service, you may have different work orders coming in from customers. Some organizations that are facing significant uptick in their products and services, which is aligned with the crisis. So if you're a supplier of VPN software like Cisco or Citrix, you may be getting a lot more demand than normal, and you have less staff to fulfill that demand, and you want to be able to do the right thing and service your customer and make them successful. But you got to be able to monitor that better by regions, by product types that are spiking in this environment, making sure those ventilators are in place if that's one of the things you're making. So being able to understand that customer service portal is really important, and if you use tools, apps like Salesforce or other CRM systems, we can hook into that very quickly and get you the dashboards that you need. Same thing with your employee productivity. Working from home requires you to make sure that you're allocating work, because you can't just walk around the office and talk to people as easily. So being able to automate how the work is getting performed across regions, across people, across where's the missed deadlines? Where are we missing? So this is sort of a dashboard that we go through internally every day to see how we're allocating work and how it's scheduled and who's overutilized, who's underutilized. That becomes really important because people aren't available in the same time zones to tell you what they can and cannot do. And so that's going to impact your business when everybody's in a remote world. So being able to do workload analysis is really important for remote workers. And that's the core of how you service your customers and how you manage and control your supply chain. So please take a look at that and let us know how we can help. And the infrastructure itself, right? Just being able to monitor how your servers are running, how your access and cybersecurity is still important. People are out there that are bad actors that are trying to take advantage of the situation here. So, being able to monitor risk in your enterprise systems, making sure that there's no insider threats, and so forth. So being able to do all that is pretty important. And so these are all the capabilities that SafePass is making available. So with that, I just wanted to jump into a case study, and it's a global tire manufacturing company that approached us after the last crisis here in the US to improve their operational risk management program by integrating their KRI analytics. And so this was sort of a company that I wanted to showcase. The company has been around for a long time. They have a global footprint, like most of our customers. Founded in 1914, headquartered in Ohio. It is a U.S. publicly listed company with 20,000 plus employees. So the challenge they had was the corporate office wanted to get control over their risk management program. They had data in factories, so products being shipped and suppliers sending the raw material into it, and all that was in place. However, it required there was no integration, right? So they couldn't really manage the risk. They were relying in typical fashion where the reports would be compiled month end and provided to management. And in case of risk management, like the current situation, hindsight maybe 2020, but it's useless if if your reports are 30 days late. You got to make decisions on literally a daily basis, and smart decisions and powerful decisions. So that was their big challenge when they came to us. Customer data wasn't available for customers out of the US. And I was thinking, that's so true today as well, because with GDPR and everything else, you got to be very careful how you treat that data, even though you need that data to ensure customer service and product quality. This was one of their big challenges as well. And then financial teams were unable to analyze, the cost versus profit to get the margin forecast to management so they could project that and report that to the Wall Street. So financial projections were a big challenge. And then a disaster recovery plan and continuity plan was mostly manual. So they wanted to put in some pieces in place to be able to alert systems and so forth, the lessons they had learned from the previous crisis. And so their solution is components of SafeSite and ArcPass. We have branded these products several times over the years, but that's what the current brand would be. So the results are that they were able to reduce the manual reporting time, right? So the whole KRI process used to take them a month, and once a month they would get a report, and it would involve quite a bit of administrative work from each of those plants. They would have to one FTE dedicated to just collecting and gathering this data, putting them into 3-ring binders and shipping that to the corporate office or emailing it at best. And so we were able to help them improve that whole process of developing the KRI data and getting it to the right people to make decisions by cutting the effort 75%. And what I don't mention there, but is important also, is the errors, right? So when you collate all that into spreadsheets, there are errors, and one of the things that we learned working with them is that the accuracy and the reliance went up as a result of having direct access to the data source globally on all manufacturing plants. And that's where the daily dashboard concept comes in, right? So they now have daily dashboards where based on your role, you can go in and log into Safe Insight and see those dashboards and make decisions that are relevant for that specific situation that day. So in crisis management, that is critical. And if you need that help, we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Increase access to capital. So what happens is once they came out of the crisis, is they were able to get so much good visibility that they were able to manage their supply chain better, cut down their raw material cost, and ultimately put a more accelerated plan to pay off the debts. There's some talk our customers have airlines have been receiving some funds already. American Airlines has received $1 billion. I think they have $8 or $9 billion left in their lines right now to get through this crisis. But there, with this new financial recovery program that governments are offering throughout the world, including U.S., there will be a need to access that capital. But of course, that'll come with some strings attached. In other words, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you have the controls in place to pay it back. So we're stepping up those capabilities as well to help you take advantage of the capital that's made available through the government entities and leverage that to get a better rating with institutions and creditors. So you're ahead of the game there. And finally, the BCP, business continuity planning risks, they were able to detect and remediate. They found that once they automated the BCP dashboards using SafePass, is that they identified I think it was 5+ BCP single points of failure in their system vulnerabilities, and that basically were causing that would have caused them to miss out on key execution steps of their BCP program, which would have meant significant disruption to the business and loss of people's resources and time and customer service. The QA in tires, as you might imagine, is a very important part of your reputation as well. So it's an overall reputation risk to the product and service delivery. So that's where this organization benefited by leveraging key risk indicators in times like this in the last crisis. So this is a lesson learned for me through this customer that I wanted to share with you as you plan your resilience programs and recovery programs. I actually picked out an old sheet from my requirements document that we started with, and I've highlighted the things that are relevant to us, to this presentation, and to our customers today as well. So the key risk indicators are all listed here. The ones that I've covered today in this presentation around raw material and price volatility, sales dashboards, brand and order management, certainly a product liability caseload, how we're dealing with issues that are reported through the consumers, information technology, disaster recovery, high availability, ERP readiness, and all that. You can see that I've highlighted that. Supply chain, commodities that are used to manufacture tires, impact on that, and risky suppliers. So we started with literally with this type of a spreadsheet or a document that was provided to us through workshops with executives at the top level, and this was our starting point. From there, we started building out these mock-ups that I, of course, sanitized. They don't show any client data, but I put we had 25 KRIs, I think, in the end. I picked about 3 or 4 as examples for this case study. So the cost of managing a global supply chain was a big impact on this tire manufacturing company. And the cost per unit was, as you can see, fluctuating. You're seeing the impact of oil prices, for example, right now, which is its own category of problems. And it has a downstream impact on raw material that comes out of that industry that's used to manufacture. So this fluctuation in cost is difficult to manage without understanding the impact on your business through these third-party suppliers, right? So that was one key indicator, key risk indicator for this organization. Capacity management, your ability to push the product out your manufacturing plants. What's the utilization right now? Obviously, it's down for most manufacturers. But as you talk about resilience, how do we get it back up to that utilization level that our financial models are built on, and how would that model over time? So being able to predict some of that or project some of that using the data that's coming in and the assumptions you're making based on your channel checks, your customer checks, and so forth across the globe, right? So that was one of the key indicators for them to be able to identify the risk in their capacity planning and manage the utilization of their manufacturing plants, which is something very relevant to the manufacturing industries with automobiles and so forth. Impacted here in Texas, we have GM plants that are shut down and so forth. Consumer quality doesn't go away. If somebody's driving on the road and their tire blows up, it's another problem, right? So being able to ensure quality is really important to these guys, and being able to see where that risk is and how that occurs and how do you mitigate that in your product liability side. It has, of course, a legal liability impact, and being able to test that by product line. So if you're making cars and you have minivans and trucks and everything else, where's that risk and how do you mitigate that? So being able to chart and analyze that and have that available on a daily basis or as quickly as possible, reasonably possible, to make those decisions. Some of this data, as you can imagine, is in many different systems, right? It's going to be in the automobile itself, right? Those of us that have the modern computers hooked up, and they're reporting back the results into a mainframe system from which you can extract the data and build out these types of QA models and avoid any further risks to your business from impact from your products. The ventilator doesn't work, right? That type of thing. Employee communication is so important in this environment, right? We just talked about remote work and the importance of how to do effective remote work. And so being able to track the remote work and people communication is so important. And so being able to identify, how people are responding to the communication, how are they feeling? Are they healthy? Are they keeping themselves safe? Are they away from these zones of high risk? Or if they are in those zones, what extra measures are they taking? So all of that information is really important to your workforce. And without your workforce, your customers and your suppliers can't function, right? So you've got to have that in place. So employee effectiveness is really important. So dashboards around employee communication and issues management. And then the topic of the day, business continuity management itself. What are the things we're planning to do to our ERP system, and what's that gonna do to our cost and our response time and so forth. So having IT provide a daily, weekly, whatever, monthly dashboard to you is really critical to be able to continue your business and move to a resilience model. So with that, I think we've used up most of the hour. Quite a few things we threw out there. I would like to turn over to Emma for any questions we might have, and then also, Emma, I think we're announcing a program that I'd like you to share with the folks on the call.
Yes, sure. We have had a couple of questions come in, actually. First question being, do you have any capabilities for risk assessment for our business continuity plan program?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're looking to revamp or improve your BCP program, what we would recommend is starting with what you have in place as a baseline, like the case study I just shared with you. And then we can bring in some best practices, some tools even to help you identify the gaps in your current class. It's a great time to think about it. I know that it sounds like one more thing to do while you're trying to, quarantine, but I think this is the time to think about when it's fresh in your mind is, what worked, what didn't work, what needs to be automated. So example is, if you need employee communication tools and self-service workflows that would have helped or they can possibly help, let us know so we can do a fit gap analysis, provide you some qualitative and quantitative assessment of your current program that you can take up the chain and get funding to get online.
Okay,
Anything
great.
Else?
Yes, can we build and maintain our own KRI dashboards, or are they built in by SafePath?
Yeah, so I think like many other, let's just call them BI tools, we are really, the heavy lifting is in actually gathering the data from data sources, which we have a tool called Data Probe. Once that Data Probe collects the objects or metadata from your, in this example, as it's used for factories, let's say, you're able to then build your own dashboards. You don't need us to do that. They're very user-friendly. Dashboards are customers often build their own, and they surprise us how well they do, better than what we can think of course, because they understand their business better. So yeah, that's something you can do. As far as hooking up data to DataProbe, we do provide you assistance with that as well. So if your data sources are remote and you really need access to that, DataProbe will go in and remotely do a discovery on that data and provide you the key metadata to enrich those dashboards. And also, if you want to take the dashboards and use and display the data into your existing BI tools, like let's say you're using Tableau or ClickView or something like that, you can also take the data, enrich those existing dashboards with this new KRI information. So there's a lot of options and flexibility. We're eager to help you get through this recovery and resilience program. With that, I'll turn it back again to you, Emma, to just kind of announce that program for us.
Thanks, Adil. Yes, we are offering a business recovery and resilience program because we obviously do know how damaging this pandemic can actually be. So as you can see, we're offering 5 key risk indicators for supply chain, finance, and customer service. So if any of you are interested in that offer, then please get in touch with myself here at SafePass. My email, you can see there, emma.kelly@safepass.com. And I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. And we will be putting the recording on our website and making the slides available to you. So do please reach out to me if you do have any questions, or if you'd like to take advantage of the offer that you can see there today. And we hope to see you again next month when we'll be joined by some of our partners from the UK. So thank you and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.